once again to the Retro Racing Managers League. It's time for the first non-championship race of this Grand Prix 2 World Championship for 1990, and it's the Birmingham Superprix. For the last few years, it's been a Formula 3000 race. Here in 1990, it is going to be for Grand Prix racing for the very first time. It'll be the pre-qualifying teams that get to sample this incredible circuit, so they will be out on racetrack in just a few moments' time. I'm Jake Sanson. Hope you're enjoying the current situation and keeping yourselves safe and sound. There's some great race action for you over the course of the next few minutes. It's obviously going to be very, very tight and very, very close up at the front end of the field, and it's particularly tight on this 80-lap Birmingham Superprix street circuit. We'll have some great racing over the course of the evening. Of course, there's still a great preparation and build-up to 1991. But this is going to be an interesting test for the pre-qualifying teams to see how they are faring in the middle of the season. It's a one-off race, points for the GoBobby.UK Championship and prize money, of course, to the Grand Prix as well. But that is all there is going to be from today's race. It's a non-championship event, it's a free-for-all and a great one-off prize. So let's see who is going to claim the 1990 Birmingham Superprix. It's been Eric Bernard who's been setting the pace through qualifying, just a whisker in front of Mark Blundell. And then we have Michael Schumacher in the Reynard alongside Bruno Giacomelli's Lola. Aguri Suzuki and Pierluigi Martini are next up from Bertrand Gachot and JJ Leto. Then it is Martin Brundle and Paul Tracy from Martin Donnelly and Alessandro Zanardi. Damon Hill comes next up alongside Ukyo Katayama's Coloni. And then it's Paul Warwick in the Porsche alongside Johnny Herbert in the Dallara. Roland Ratzenberger and Piercarlo Ginzani come next up. Willie T. Ribbs in the Real and Christian Fittipaldi in the Life. And then it's Eddie Irvine and Alan McNish from Juan Fangio II and Joachim Winkelhock from Roberto Guerrero and Gabriele Tarquini. It's going to be a fascinating battle as we go to the grid. Now we are going to have 80 laps of no holds barred, no nonsense racing. It is Bernard in the Monteverdi on the right. It is Blundell in the Osella on the left. And for these 80 laps, we're going to get a real flavour of great motorsport. Who's going to get the best start? We will find out as the drivers get underway here at the Birmingham Superprix. Ready? We are away and racing. And it's a great start from Bruno Giacomelli. He launches up alongside Blundell and storms his way forward. Schumacher's got a good start as well in the Reynard. Suzuki trying to hug to the inside line, and he's got the jump on Schumacher. So he moves up into third position. So Schumacher, Gachot, Blundell, Martini and Leto follow in pursuit. And we've already got a perfect start from Eric Bernard in the Monteverdi. He storms down towards the Halfords hairpin. And this is an absolutely thrilling start. Here's Bertrand Gachot making his first bid on Michael Schumacher into the hairpin. No problem at all for the Coloni. He's got through on the inside line. And so he gets through at Halfords corner up to the long part of the straight on the far side of the course and heading back into the main section of the course now. It's Eric Bernard in front of Bruno Giacomelli and Aguri Suzuki in the two Lolas. Then it is Gachot in the Coloni, Schumacher in the Reynard, Martini in the Minardi. From Leto, Blundell, Hill, Brundle, Donnelly, Katayama, Warwick, Zanardi and Tracy. So Katayama seems to have made the move on Martin Donnelly on the first lap. It's a clean start so far, as everybody seems to have got through in reasonable condition. I have to say, everybody has kept it nice and easy on the first lap, and that's good because obviously this opening lap is going to be a very tricky one. So everybody has remembered that you can't win the race on the opening lap, but you can definitely lose it. So everybody's now coming through in fine position. Bernard, Giacomelli and Suzuki, then Gachot, Schumacher in the Reynard ahead of Martini's Minardi. Just the one-off race, this, of course, as Aguri Suzuki now makes the plunge on his teammate Giacomelli to go up into second position. It's going to be interesting to see how these guys go over the course of 80 laps. It's the longest race that the pre-qualifying teams have been given in 1990. And they don't have to worry about qualifying for a Grand Prix after this one, because this is the main event. As Giacomelli again tries to get back past his Japanese teammate. But Suzuki is not going to allow that one to fly, and he runs in second position so far. Here's Roland Ratzenberger in the second of the Cadbury's Reynards. We've just heard that they're going to have a change in sponsorship for 1991. It'll be the fast food chain McDonald's that gets on board with them for the 1991 season with new team manager Phil Kinch. So that'll be fascinating to see what colours they appear with next year. I'm going to guess it's red and yellow. But Eric Bernard comes across the line, leading the way from... Oh, Bruno Giacomelli making a mistake there at the first corner by the look of it, as Gachot and Martini close up. So Martini's got by Schumacher. And the field continues on its way. A very tight and twisty circuit this, but also very fast and open and flowing. So we should see plenty of overtaking manoeuvres. Down the straight once again. Here's Schumacher on board, and that's Gasho making the bid on the inside of Giacomelli, and I think Martini's trying to get through. Oh, cheeky move there from Leto as he gets past Schumacher. Warwick locks up on the brakes in the Porsche, nearly loses ground to Alessandro Zanardi's Osella. And that car is going to become the Fonmetal team for 1991, of course. But the livery and the commercial partnership is going to remain unchanged from what we're told. Of the Porsche, of course, is in its last season as a works entrant before it joins forces with Williams as a factory entry, and they'll also be supplying engines to Benetton for 1990. Oh, and that's Fangio. Fangio's made a mistake there. He's overshot in the right-hander, and he nudges the wall. He's lucky to get away with that one, actually, because he's got a great battle coming in from Guerrero, Winkelhock, and Tarquini. So Guerrero trying to make the bid into the left-hander. And so a fascinating battle already very much underway as the cars continue through the Birmingham city streets. But it's a great race thus far. Here's Aguri Suzuki chasing down Eric Bernard in the Monteverdi. Paul Warwick in the Porsche. Not having as good luck as he has had over the course of the season, but the Porsche still running strong. And up the inside, that looks like it could be a move from Alessandro Zanardi, but Paul Warwick shuts the door firmly there. Not going to let him go. Several lines of overtaking opportunity through the Castrol corners and then through the Halfords hairpin. And up the inside, that looks like a move from Martin Brundle's Minardi trying to get past Martin Donnelly in the Eurobrun, and that did not work. So now it's bunched the field up big time. In the midfield, some great battles as Warwick has a look at Brundle. And now on the inside, that's Ratzenberger trying to make a push towards Zanardi. And it didn't work. A good train of cars developing there. Lap 5 begins as Eric Bernard and Aguri Suzuki, former teammates of course, continue to stretch away. Eric Bernard started the season in this Lola. Switched to the Monteverdi team mid-season. Now here is Paul Warwick having a crack at Martin Brundle to try and move up into 12th. Brundle slamming the door firmly shut. Brundle recently confirming that he's going to be joining the Benetton team for 1991. So expect Martin Brundle to be putting all that experience and Le Mans knowledge. He's been in Formula 1, of course, since 1984. As up the inside, good move there as Brundle gets through. And that was a move from Willie T. Ribbs to get past... Oh, no, sorry, we were on board with Mark Blundell there, actually, to get the move on Michael Schumacher's Reynard. So Mark Blundell up into 7th position. Raced here last year in Formula 3000, of course, Mark Blundell. And that's Eddie Irvine. Now, why is he a long way down the order? Could be a heavy fuel load. It looks as though he's going to go all the way to lap 40 on that fuel tank. Meanwhile, Damon Hill in trouble. Damon Hill's got an engine failure, so that's a big problem for the Dallara. And we can see there that he was trying to pull off, but he had cars behind him trying to come through. Oh, and that's caused all sorts of problems. It looks as though there's damage to one of the cars there. Couldn't quite make out who it was, but certainly we've got problems as Brundle nudges the back of Hill's car. I want to see who it was that ran into the back of the car. Oh, it's Willie T. Ribbs. And Willie T. Ribbs now has damage to the front wing. So Willie T. Ribbs in the Real, sadly, is going to have to come into the pits. But the Dallara of Damon Hill is pulling off to the side of the road. And that is, I'm afraid, his race well and truly run. So that Dallara, which is getting a nice paint job update every time it goes out onto the circuit pretty much these days. It's had a little bit more black added to... essentially continue its Converse upgrade. I wouldn't be surprised if that car was completely black and white for 1991. But certainly it's looking more and more like a Converse All-Star. Willie T. Ribbs does pit the car after sustaining some damage there. But Damon Hill bringing the car to a stop. He really could do with parking the car and getting out of it. But yeah, the marshals there are attending to the scene. And Damon Hill is now... unfortunately out of the Birmingham Superprix of 1990. Didn't have much success there in Formula 3000, and I'm afraid in a Formula 1 car it hasn't done much different. So here's Mark Blundell pushing his way forward, trying to get the move on the inside of the Monteverdi, and not really able to get the move. Oh, Bruno Giacomelli locking up as he tries to close up on Pierluigi Martini. Now Schumacher's plunged to 8th position, and he must be on a heavier fuel load as Giacomelli gets very close to the wall on the way through the final turn. Suzuki has caught right up to Eric Bernard, so Bernard is on the push, but he's being caught rapidly by Aguri Suzuki, who's going to try and get the win in the Birmingham Superprix. Remember, this is not a championship, but it is a full-length Grand Prix. So essentially the teams are being pushed to their absolute limits. The crowds are loving it. They get to see Formula 1 cars up close and personal. They get to watch a proper race. And we get to see some stars of the future continuing to fight their way forward. Here's Eric Bernard, race leader. Lap 7 out of 80. Into the right-hander, as Paul Warwick is under threat again from Brundle, and this time Brundle has launched the Minardi up the inside to good effect. Slices through, no problem at all. Piercarlo Ghinzani, meanwhile, is struggling to get the Zach speed further forward. The team is going to finish their association with West for next year, I'm told, and they're going to be partnering up with BMW in 1991. Looks as though Brundle is still trying to shake off Paul Warwick. Warwick in the Porsche has another crack at him. Meanwhile, Ghinzani, who is going to hang up his helmet at the end of the year, has a go on the inside of Ratzenberger and gets through. So nicely handled there by Piercarlo Ghinzani. He gets a perfect overtaking move. I wonder if any teams might be interested in getting him out of retirement, because he certainly looks like he's still got some good moves. As Warwick tries again on Brundle. Brundle again slams the door firmly shut in the Porsche's face. But obviously, Martin Brundle could do with picking Paul Warwick's brain ahead of 1991. He's going to have Porsche engines in the Formula 1 car next year. Meanwhile, Schumacher is losing another place, this time again to Blundell. So there is Schumacher having a bit of a battle. Katayama closing up. And that's because Schumacher's on a very heavy fuel load, so the car is obviously heavier than its cars around it. But Schumacher's got a long-term game plan. Here's Leto in the Monteverdi, trying to have a go around the outside of Giacomelli. And that's why, because he's got a much lighter car than Giacomelli, as Gasho continues there in P3. Zanardi having a good race there with the Canadian Paul Tracy in the second Porsche, as Brundle has lost out to Warwick once again. But there's a lot of toing and froing as drivers are still trying to shake off their opponents while also attack the opposition. So Eric Bernard leads the way to a second to Aguri Suzuki. Gasho is another 1.5 seconds back. Then Martini, Giacomelli, Leto, Blundell, Schumacher, Katayama and Donnelly, and Zanardi trying to slam it up the inside of Martin Brundle. And it doesn't work, as Aguri Suzuki is now through past Bernard. So he gets past Eric Bernard. Has Bernard got a problem? No, he's just got a heavier fuel load. So Suzuki finally catches and passes Eric Bernard and takes the lead away from the Monteverdi. And as a result of that, Gasho in the Coloni is also closing up. He must be on a lighter fuel load too than the Monteverdi. So Bernard playing the long game. He'll have one less pit stop than the Lola Renault, but that doesn't necessarily mean he'll be in a good position, as Paul Warwick locks up the Porsche, manages to catch the car. But how much time is that going to cost him to Martin Brundle? That's the big difference. And that's obviously going to be a very determining factor as they come through into the tight and twisty section that finishes the lap. Not a very long lap at all. There's just a whisker under 70 seconds, which means that an 80-lap race is obviously going to be very intense and very grueling, but the drivers are giving it everything they've got. So Brundle in front of Tracy, but for how much longer? Tracy gets the move on the inside. Brundle is keeping that door firmly closed, and Tracy is edged into the back of the battle behind him. Zanardi, Herbert, and I think Ratzenberger. It is indeed Ratzenberger, so only one retirement. That, I'm afraid, is Damon Hill in the Converse Dallara. But the two Reals are down the back of the grid. Willie Ribbs because of a problem. And Zanardi makes the bid on the inside of Paul Tracy. Almost opens the door back on the switch. But Zanardi gets through. I was going to make a point that the Reals are down the order. Irvine in 19th and Ribbs in 25th. And that is largely because they've on... Well, Ribbs had a heavy incident there mid-race as Zanardi locks up. So Ribbs ended up getting damaged trying to avoid Damon Hill's car. And Irvine is on a significantly heavy fuel load. It looks like he might even be trying to one-stop it, which is very brave indeed from Eddie Irvine. We'll have to see what that does to the overall scale of things. But Bernard is under pressure from Gasho. Gasho having a look in the Coloni. Bernard holding the inside line. Gasho decides to go for broke up the inside, and the Coloni Ferrari gets through into second place then for Bertrand Gasho. So very nicely handled by the Belgian, and he is up into second position. Bernard dropping places, and I think Schumacher has lost out again to Martin Donnelly. So Michael Schumacher, the young 21-year-old, tucks up behind Mark Blundell once more. He's having another go at it. So Schumacher tries his luck on the inside line ahead of Mark Blundell, and he gets there. So Michael Schumacher really showcasing his potential talent. He's actually being snapped up by Ferrari for 1991, would you believe? They've seen something in this young German star. They think he's the real deal. So he will be thrust into the limelight. He hasn't even started a Grand Prix yet, don't forget. Because he's with Reynard this year, but they haven't managed to pre-qualify for a Grand Prix once on this occasion. So they clearly feel that young Michael Schumacher is worth his weight in gold. He's been dovetailing his Formula 1 commitments with Reynard with the Sauber Mercedes sports car project, and he's been one of the stars of that campaign. And now he will team up with Nigel Mansell next year at Ferrari. So he will go to Ferrari as a complete rookie. I'm trying to remember the last time Ferrari fielded a rookie in Formula 1. So there is Eric Bernard. Suzuki and Gasho out in front. Bernard still running a solid third ahead of Martini, Leto, Giacomelli and Schumacher. Then Blundell, Katayama and Donnelly from Warwick, Brundle, Zanardi, Tracy, Herbert and Ratzenberger. And there's Herbert getting on the inside line in the sole remaining Converse. So that Converse Dallara going very well indeed as it makes the move. Now Bernard is still giving Gasho a bit of pressure as Tracy gets the move again on Herbert, leaves it very late and can't make it stick. Tarquini, meanwhile, is having a battle further back down the field with Joachim Winkelhock as he tries to move his way forward. But Tarquini is not having a lot of luck with AGS, and we've just heard news that the AGS team is going to be rebranded for 1991. It's going to have an Australian takeover bid. The team will become the Holden Racing F1 team as the Holden name makes its debut in Formula 1 next year. I can't wait till we get to Adelaide in 1991. There's going to be a massive Australian party and a huge turn up. Oh, Roberto Guerrero having a problem there as he nudges the wall. You could just hear a little clatter of the barriers there as he came through. So Suzuki, Gasho, Bernard, Martini and Leto. That's the top five at the moment. Under normal circumstances, we'd be talking about the top three in the race, because the top three in the GoBobber.UK Cup, or pre-qualifying as it's also known, would normally be the ones to go through to a Grand Prix. But this is the main event this time. Just a race between the pre-qualifiers, and it's looking likely that the Birmingham Superprix will be a non-championship race for pre-qualifiers for the foreseeable future, in the hope that the Birmingham Superprix stays. Bernard locks up. Obviously, it's going to be subject to the popularity of this event. It's been a very interesting event, the Birmingham Superprix, the last 4 years. It's had both touring cars and Formula 3000 on the bill. But the progression of bringing Formula 1 to the streets of Birmingham really has been a fantastic opportunity. And here in 1990 in the Retro Racing Managers League, the opportunity was just too good to miss. So the cars come through once again. It's a Goody Suzuki doing a grand job out in front of the race at the moment. 2 seconds clear of Gasho. Then Eric Bernard in the Monteverdi. Aguri Suzuki pushing very hard there, it seems, as Giacomelli now has his look at Michael Schumacher. One of the most experienced drivers on the grid, Bruno Giacomelli, who's been racing in Formula 1 for a long time, still hungry for a seat in 1991. Nothing's been confirmed for him so far. As Gasho ploughs down the main straight. And Christian Fittipaldi, the youngest man in the field, only 18 years of age. He's certainly the youngest ever Grand Prix driver of any kind. And he has actually started his first Grand Prix, so it's going to take a heck of a lot for someone to break that record. The youngest ever Formula 1 race starter, Christian Fittipaldi. And of course the nephew of the two-time world champion Emerson Fittipaldi. The Life team is not likely to be with us again in 1991 from what we hear, although team boss Tom Cairns is hoping to take a fair few of the assets with him to the Lola team, which is where he'll be managing in 1991. And of course the race after this one is going to be the Belgian Grand Prix, so we'll see the pre-qualifiers out there in good nick, but we'll also see the Formula 1 teams and drivers battling away for position. Here's Eric Bernard once again in third, trying to chase down Bertrand Gachot as we ride on board with Johnny Herbert in the black and red Converse Dallara. And Johnny Herbert really is a bit of an all-star. He's in his second campaign in Formula 1. Last year he made a riveting debut for Benetton, and it looks as though Johnny Herbert will remain with Converse Dallara for 1991, although I'm sure he would like to consider a top 10 team opportunity for the year after that, as Willie T. Ribbs gets his move on one of the AGS cars. That's going to be a Holden for next year. And of course AGS yet to qualify for a Grand Prix in 1990. one of only 2 teams that hasn't done. Which is the other team? If you guessed that it was the Reynard team, then you would be absolutely right. It's only Reynard and AGS that have yet to get onto a Grand Prix grid in 1990. And there's Juan Fangio the second. Big lock up there for the Woolworths car as he continues his way down the straight. They've got a lot of fans, the Eurobrunn, here this weekend. Obviously, a very British set of brand names there on the Eurobrunn this year. Woolworths, Chad Valley and Ladybird. All owned by the Woolworths Group, of course. And great to see them pushing on very hard indeed around this Birmingham City Street Circuit as Eric Bernard goes into lap 17. Ratzenberger still trying to take on Paul Tracy. The Austrian hasn't relented, and he's certainly doing a better job than he did last time out at the Hungaroring when the car really wasn't looking like it was on the pace. And Ratzenberger definitely stepping up to the plate a little bit this time. Here's Bernard. And the Monteverdi driver still showcasing some good speed. But it's going to be an absolutely thrilling battle when he makes his first pit stop, although the first pit stops are not far away. As into the pits is going to come Aguri Suzuki this time by. So the pit stops are being prepared. And on lap 17 of 80, the first of the 3 stoppers will be making their way into the pit. So it's going to be Aguri Suzuki that does so first. And Eric Bernard will take over the lead. I'm fairly sure he's on a 2-stop strategy as Johnny Herbert locks up the sole remaining Converse Dallara. And Aguri Suzuki is going to plunge the Lola into the pits. Here he comes. And I think Bertrand Gachot is going to come into the pits on the same lap from what I'm told. Indeed, he does. So Aguri Suzuki comes in the Lola. So it's pit stop time in Birmingham. Hurled in the pits, JJ Leto in the Monteverdi decides to come into the pits as well, so they're splitting strategies at Monteverdi. It wouldn't surprise me if they split strategies across the board. 9.4 seconds for Suzuki. Not the fastest pit stop Lola have performed this year. Where is he going to rejoin? Suzuki gets back out on track and he's in P9, so he's in behind Paul Warwick in the Porsche. So there's Michael Schumacher. Now, moved up into 3rd place. Oh, Leto comes out onto the circuit right into the path of Paul Tracy. And that got very messy for the Finn. So JJ Leto just about getting out of that one without too many scars. But that was a big moment as Piercarlo Ginzani locks up the Zach speed on the way through. And Leto's getting straight on with it on fresh tyres. He wants to get straight back up the inside of Paul Tracy and does so nicely. So a good overtaking move there as we run on board with Michael Schumacher. He's got a good few laps in this car yet before he makes the pit stop as Eric Bernard crosses the line to go into lap 19. And the Monteverdi running well. Pierluigi Martini second. I think he's on a 3-stop strategy as well based on his fuel levels. Schumacher's on a 2-stopper. Here's Ratzenberger making his bid again on Tracy. Oh, you've got to be really brave to keep your foot stuck in there. So Ratzenberger decides to let bygones be bygones as Paul Warwick brings the Porsche into the pit lane with Eric Bernard and the Monteverdi still out front. He goes through Halford's corner and plows back on the throttle down the crest. And this is a great bit of racing from Bernard up front, just keeping it nice and tidy. He knew he had a slower car initially than Suzuki and Gachot, let them both go, but didn't let it affect his rhythm. And his race pace is still very strong. But Suzuki and Gachot are about 20 seconds behind, so it's still not done and dusted for Eric Bernard. In fact, if anything, the race just got started for him. He has a 2-second advantage over Martini, but the Italian in the Minardi is yet to make a pit stop, and he will certainly be doing so imminently with only a handful of laps of fuel left on board. As Zanardi has to run wide and let JJ Leto get back through into 12th position. So Leto is doing his best to move up through the field and has definitely picked up a couple of cars as we complete the 20th lap now. Martini's on it. As into the pits comes Katayama. So Katayama in the Coloni goes into the pits. The Japanese driver who won at the pre-qualifying race in Brazil as Warwick again tries to make an overtaking move. This time it's on the life of Alan McNish. And that's going to be fascinating to see if Warwick can make the bid on the inside line. He has a go, but Paul Warwick has to back out of it in the end. As Willie T. Ribbs makes the mistake. Oh, twice rubbing the barriers there. So a big mistake from the Real driver as Juan Fangio II comes into the pits. And again, that is for a scheduled pit stop on this occasion. Meanwhile, Leto has got the jump on Herbert, I believe. So JJ Leto is now into 10th place. Having gone side by side with Johnny Herbert down to Halford's corner, I think it was. But 20 laps completed for Eric Bernard. He is now 2 seconds clear of Pierluigi Martini. And we are 1/4 distance through this Birmingham Superprix. So Bernard, Martini, Schumacher, Blundell, Giacomelli, Suzuki, Donnelly, Gasho, Brundle and Leto is the top 10. Still a long way to go as we ride on board with Guru Suzuki, trying to close up on his own teammate. Fascinating split shifts between these two cars. Giacomelli, I think, on a lighter fuel load than Suzuki by a little, but not by much. Suzuki definitely pushing and motivated as here comes the Japanese driver, taking on his teammate. He has to back out of it. Now, inter-team politics already looking very interesting at Carter McColeman's squad. But the Lola Renault team with LaRousse backing is set to get a rebrand for 1991. LaRousse will be gone, essentially. And the French team is going to have to look into another program, potentially even sports cars, as Suzuki does make the move on the inside there of Bruno Giacomelli. So Lola is going to have its own strength and bond for 1991. LaRousse has said they are going to have a look at Formula One again, but at the moment it's not really going the way they planned it to, as Tarquini goes side by side with Ratzenberger, and Ratzenberger goes around the outside, so gets the place. Now Martini is in the pits, that's from second position, and so this man takes over third behind Schumacher. That is Mark Blundell in the Lego Osella, although next year it will be known as the Fon Metal. And the livery for next year is already starting to creep onto the car with its very popular Lego insignia. Eric Bernard, though, is 13 seconds clear of the field. And the battle continues. It's going to be very interesting to see how this one plays out, because we've got Bertrand Gachot there now, tucked up behind Giacomelli. But Gachot, on fresher tyres, is clearly the faster driver at the moment. Guerrero pits in from P19. And Giacomelli's got a big run on the inside from Gachot. Gachot tries. Giacomelli's not going to let him have it. So Bertrand Gachot's got to try again. And we've got Martin Donnelly in the Eurobrun now up in 7th place as a result of all the pit stops. But Donnelly is going quite a fair way into the race as well, having started the season with Lotus. Here's Ratzenberger. Makes the bid on the inside of Winkelhock. No problem at all. Amazing. Can you remember a few races ago when Winkelhock was dominating the GoBobby.UK Cup in that Zach Speed? And now he is being fairly handed to in various different parts of the circuit by the others. They really have caught up in terms of development. And Schumacher continues to try and stretch away from Blundell and Suzuki. Is this going to be the race where Michael Schumacher comes of age, as Brundle moves around the first corner at Bristol Street Motors and works his way through the S's now. But Blundell still having a good run in third place ahead of a Goody Suzuki. So Blundell, hopefully likely to get a decent run of the podium here. The only Brit in the top 3 at this precise moment in time. But it's a long old race, is the Birmingham Superprix. Just the one retirement thus far. Damon Hill in the Converse Dallara. But there have been 2 drivers who have been lapped, as you can see. Willie T. Ribbs in the Real and Roberto Guerrero in the AGS. So Eric Bernard still leads the way in the Monteverdi, which is going to team up with the comic book magnate Jean Graton next season. It'll be Cosworth engines in the back of that Monteverdi again, but this time they will be badged as Vaillants, because after the great comic book character Michel Vaillant. So next year the car will be a Monteverdi Vaillant, which is a fabulous concept and a great plan. And you're going to see the very infamous and very popular Vaillant logos on the cars next year. Here's Johnny Herbert into the pits, the Converse Dallara, and also in comes Piercarlo Ghinzani. So already a couple of midfielders trying their luck at a decent run for the pits. Michael Schumacher can't be too far away from a pit stop. You can see on his fuel dash there that he's only got 9 laps worth of fuel on board, so it's imminent that he's going to be looking at making his pit stop. It could even be a 1-stop strategy, never mind a 2-stop. Especially if he decides to leave it as late as humanly possible. But I would suspect that a 1-stop strategy is not actually that smart here at the Birmingham Superprix. I would think that essentially it's 2-stop or 3-stop that's going to work. A 1-stop is unlikely to, especially given how worn the tyres are going to be and how, well, the car will be light, but you won't be able to get any grip out of it as Alan McNish makes mincemeat of Eddie Irvine. 2 British names of the future you want to keep an eye on, as Willie T. Ribbs tries to unlap himself from Eric Bernard. Now, Willie T. Ribbs is going to be part of the BMW F1 project next year, with the two race drivers already being confirmed as Stefan Johansson and Damon Hill. As Aguri Suzuki makes the bid on the inside of Mark Blundell, and the Japanese driver will go into third place. He does indeed. Johnny Herbert having a little bit of a wiggle in the middle of the corner there. But Mark Blundell has to let Aguri Suzuki go. So Blundell well and truly cornered there by Suzuki. Here's Michael Schumacher, still running second at the moment in the Reynard, coming up to the end of lap 25 out of 80. So still a solid race and still a good battle from the young German. 21 years of age from Kerpen in Germany. As Willie T. Ribbs has his look again on the inside of Bernard to unlap himself. What is Willie T. Ribbs playing at? Who's he trying to impress? He's going to be a test driver for next season. But it really isn't giving him what he needs in terms of the a proper battle. Now Donnelly comes into the pits. You just saw him there dive into the pits in the Eurobrun. So Donnelly on a two-stop strategy by the look of things, because he pits in at the end of lap 25. And so Martin Donnelly will drop back, I reckon, to about 13th place maybe, just a whisker in between McNish and Ratzenberger. It will be tight between them. Oh, and Warwick nudges the barrier there. That's going to give Donnelly a little bit of a leg up as Donnelly exits the pits. And in fact, the Eurobrun, by being on a different strategy, has actually made this work for him. He's only lost 4 places out of the pits. So the Eurobrun is actually now in 11th position. Very good strategy from the Eurobrun squad. And their team boss, Lewis Bassendale, will be very happy with that, because that's definitely elevated them. Zach Speeds go to war. Ginzani on the inside of Winkelhock. There's one rule in this sport. Don't take out your teammate. And we very nearly had an example of that happening just there. Now here's Gasho. He's closing in on Mark Blundell. So that could end up getting very interesting. But Bernard still leads. Schumacher in second. Suzuki third from Blundell, Gasho, Martini, Giacomelli, Leto, Brundle, Katayama, Donnelly and Paul Warwick in 12th place, ahead of Ratzenberger and then McNish and Irvine in the Life and the Real respectively. We're on board with Johnny Herbert, who, to be fair, has got a bit of work to make up on. He's got some ground to find, having had some problems in the middle of the race, having had a pit stop. Oh, and it looks like he's lost another position there. So Johnny Herbert, he's battling with Irvine, so that is why they're having a little bit of a side-by-side moment. Meanwhile, Tarquini and Ribbs are having a good, juicy battle, and it's Tarquini in the AGS that has to give best. So a nice, interesting little squabble between those two. And it's down the straight. Beautiful circuit here at the Birmingham Superprix, and a fantastic concept. It's been a Formula 3000 event since 1986. And Eric Bernard pits in from the lead. So this is an important pit stop to pick up on. Where is Bernard? Here he comes. So the Monteverdi, with about 4 laps of fuel left on board, pits in for another 25 laps worth. So that should take him to about lap 49, I would think. So lap 49 is probably when we're going to see Bernard back in the pits. Blundell does the same, pits at the same time. And Bernard rejoins in 5th position behind Martini. Now that is significant because Martini has definitely made up some ground since he made his pit stop, and Bernard has dropped back as Fittipaldi shakes off the attentions of Juan Fangio II in the Eurobrun. But Bernard has lost a lot more time than he would have liked, because Suzuki, Gasho and Martini have all gone through, and Martini was not ahead of him at the last rotation of pit stops. So essentially Martini has managed to gain a good 3 or 4 seconds now on Eric Bernard and overtake him and move up into what is 4th place. But of course that is net 3rd, as Giacomelli now gets his bid on Leto. But Yoriki Yavoleto, or JJ Leto as he's known, is struggling to shake off Bruno Giacomelli. The Italian is still all over the back of him, as Aguri Suzuki is now closing up to Michael Schumacher. Now Schumacher in the Reynard is going to have older tyres. That's going to be his biggest issue now, because he's going on a very long 2-stop strategy, maybe even a 1-stop, as Leto strikes the barriers. Not a great moment there for the Finn, but he's trying to shake off Giacomelli, so the pressure is sky high with him at the moment. And Giacomelli's going to try and move to the inside line. No chance. It's already well shut down by the Finn. So Giacomelli's going to have to try again for Halford's corner. But we're on lap 29. And still just the one retirement. Damon Hill in the Converse Dallara. There is Michael Schumacher going well in the Reynard. And Fittipaldi swarming in behind Winkelhock's Zach Speed. It's going to be a complete rebrand for the team next year. They will go with BMW power in 1991, and so a lot of the Zach Speed appearance is going to be a celebration of that BMW partnership. And here is Bertrand Gachot in the Coloni. Now we're told that BMW is going to be bringing the Golf colours back to Formula 1 next year, and they will also team up with Davidoff, the perfumers, I believe. So Schumacher in the pits in the Reynard, that's his teammate we're looking at. So into the pits comes Schumacher, 24 laps of fuel going in there for the German. And he should rejoin at around the Martin Brundle mark, as Paul Warwick gets it very slippery there in the Porsche. That was close. Manages to catch the car before anything untoward happens. But Schumacher is going to rejoin behind Katayama, and I think he'll... Blundell just sets the fastest lap of the race, so 106.994 for Mark Blundell, in his bid to close up again on Schumacher, who rejoins after his pit stop in 9th. So yet again, it looks like the 3-stop route is definitely the better one, because the 2 stoppers seem to have lost more time in the first stint. Here's Katayama, gets the move on Brundle. Katayama tries the switchback, but Katayama has it well nailed, so the Japanese driver gets through. He's going to be teaming up with the Honda squad next year, which will completely take over the Leighton House team. That means that Leighton House will not remain in the top 10 teams. They will have to move down into pre-qualifying as part of the requisite for a rebrand, but they'll still keep that same backing from Leighton House. So the Honda Works team will essentially have no change in appearance, or very minimal change in appearance, but it's going to be essentially a test bed for Japanese drivers. They really want to use more talent amongst the Japanese racers in the sport, and Honda is very committed to making a Japanese driver a Grand Prix winner. Here's Brundle. And at the inside, that is Michael Schumacher, who gets through into 8th place. No wonder Ferrari had their eye on him, and they snapped him up for 1991 to partner Nigel Mansell. So whatever happens, Stefano Modena is not going to be staying at Ferrari for 1991, at least not in a race driver position. And in fact, Modena is going to be moving to Lola in 1991. He's signed up for the... Oh, that's Irvine making it very wrong, and that's going to give Ghinzani the upper hand. So Ghinzani sweeps by. Not a lot Eddie Irvine can do about that one. So he needs to be very careful how he continues his move forward. But Irvine still looking for a race drive, of course, in 1991, Eddie Irvine. There's quite a few people interested in his services. But he hasn't signed a contract as yet, from what I'm told. So Aguri Suzuki continues to lead here, having taken the lead away from Schumacher in the pit stop phase. But the Japanese driver is trying to stretch out a gap of 5 seconds over Bertrand Gachot, the Belgian, as Roberto Guerrero makes his move up on the inside of Winkelhock, and that puts him up into 23rd. There's the Converse Dallara, Johnny Herbert at the wheel. The black, red and white machine, which is steadily looking more and more like a Converse All-Star shoe as time wears on. It's great to see that the team are still ploughing more and more into this car. And it continues to develop. Now here's Bernard. He's caught up to Gachot. Has Gachot got a problem as Ghinzani has a moment there? His teammate Winkelhock is in the middle of a battle there as well with Guerrero, with Suzuki closing in on them to put a lap on them. Now look at this traffic jam we've got building. This is Gachot, Bernard and Martini for second position. So Gachot struggling to fend off from Bernard with a heavier car. And Bernard is going for it. Up into second place past Gachot. Can he hold it on the inside line? He can't quite get the car alongside. Oh, and that's a big mistake from Martini. Martini locks up the Minardi into the first corner. I thought that a mechanical failure was coming on, but no. Martini just losing the car altogether. And now Bernard is again under threat. So Bernard makes the move on the inside of Gachot, and Bernard gets through in the Monteverdi. Nicely handled. And a really good opportunity now for the Frenchman to go after Aguri Suzuki. And don't forget he has got fresher tyres than the guys around him, even though he's on a slightly differing fuel strategy. So he's trying to make those tyres work better for him in the short term. Meanwhile, Donnelly is battling with Brundle in the second of the Minardis. And this is turning into a real race of skill and tactics here. It's certainly not a race of attrition because everybody is still circling around as Donnelly again shakes off Martin Brundle. It's going very well indeed from the Northern Irishman's point of view as Donnelly continues his great move forward. Looks like the luck of the Irish is moving forward because there's been a few Northern Irish drivers on the grid recently as Aguri Suzuki trips over one of the Zach Speeds. But I am told that we're going to have a Grand Prix debut, we hope, from Tommy Byrne, the Irishman. He's going to be joining the grid in 1991. In fact, while we're at this stage of the race, it is worth giving you an update as to what the state of play is going to be for 1991 as the new paddock for next year takes shape. And of course, we are going to have some amazing talent on the grid next season. So it's worth trying to figure out who's going to be who and who's racing what, because it's obviously going to be of great interest to all of the fans of the Retro Racing Managers League as Suzuki finally gets a lap on Joachim Winkelhock. So for 1991, Burger King McLaren will continue with Honda engines, and it's going to be Gerhard Berger in the team alongside the Italian star Alessandro Nannini, who moves in at McLaren next year. Dave Coyne as test driver, young Paul Stewart as a development driver, and he'll race in F3000. For the Red Bull Tyrrell team, they'll keep the Honda engines that they had in 1990, and team boss Sam Hall has retained the services of both Jean Alesi and Heinz-Harald Frentzen for 1991. With Satoru Nakajima as the team test driver, providing good test bed options for Honda. And Rickard Rydell, the Swede, is going to be the development driver. He's had a couple of races for them, but the young 22-year-old is going to continue his racing development with Tyrrell and, of course, continue in a race driver role in F3000. He'll return to F3000 for 1991. Now, Williams are teaming up with Silkcut and Porsche next year to make a brand new team. And it's effectively Williams rebranded. They've managed to retain the services of Thierry Boutsen, but they've also signed the 1988 world champion Ayrton Senna. So the Brazilian will move to Williams in 1991 with Porsche engines and the technical support of Paul Warwick as test driver and Gilda Ferran of Brazil as their development driver. Martini Brabham continues, although they're going to have a much more Welsh influence for the 1991 season in deference to team manager Ewan Gale. Ilmor engines come in, and they've managed to retain the services of Alain Prost and Mika Hakkinen for next season, with Emmanuel Collard as test driver, the Frenchman. So that'll be interesting to see how things go. At Benetton, they will continue with Rowntree's and Porsche engines for the 1991 season, with Martin Brundle and Mark Blundell confirmed at the team. So that's going to be confusing for commentators. Thanks, John Munro. But two British stars, one established and one rising up the rankings. It's going to be interesting to see how the Sorcerer and his apprentice get on next year. So far, no test and development drivers confirmed as Roland Ratzenberger locks up in the middle of the course there. At the Castrol Lotus Renault team, it's an all change for team boss Ryan Ferris, and he will retain Derek Warwick as a race driver. The only other appointment confirmed so far is the Italian Vincenzo Sospiri as a development driver. So we'll see him in F3000 next year. At Scuderia Ferrari, well, it's going to be very exciting. Nigel Mansell stays, and young Michael Schumacher, who is currently in 7th place in the 1990 Birmingham Superprix, is currently trying to battle his way through the field, but he'll be in a Ferrari F1 car next year. That's pretty awesome. As Martini tries to shake off Winkelhock in the very fast Zach Speed Yamaha. That's going to have BMW engines for next year. More on that story later. The Arrows team is going to become known as the Tecate Arrows BMW squad. They'll have a lot more Mexican influence from their driver Adrian Fernandez, but they've also acquired the services of the 3-time world champion Nelson Piquet. So he will join the Tecate Arrows team. Then it is Leighton House Honda, which is essentially Leighton House now the sponsor rather than the team entrant, and Honda is a works factory entry in Formula 1 thanks to team boss Andrew Sanson. With Aguri Suzuki and Ukyo Katayama on the driving front, and Hideki Noda is the team test driver at present. There's just one more to announce, and that's likely to be the young driver. So the Converse BMS Dallara team will have Ferrari engines and Emma Featherstone still at the helm. Johnny Herbert remains. Gianni Morbidelli will join from Ferrari. Whoops, that's Gabriele Tarquini nudging the barrier. And speaking of Italians, it'll be Fabrizio Giovanardi who joins the Dallara team on their development driver front. Herbert and Morbidelli. Inter-team workings and the expertise of Ferrari to blend into 1991. Then we'll have the Playboy Ligier Renault team for the 1991 season with Will Knight. No race drivers confirmed as yet, but they've signed up Jean-Marc Gounod as team test driver. Oh, that's Zanardi. Alessandro Zanardi out of the race. So problems there for the Osella as his race has come to a premature end. I was going to say Jean-Marc Gounod as test driver for Playboy Ligier next year, and alongside him will be Jean-Christophe Bouillon. And he will be the development driver for 1991. Campari Lamborghini comes in for next season as a factory effort. And they're also going to team up with the Adidas brand, or Adidas, depending on where in the world you are. But it'll be officially known as Campari Lamborghini. Ed Spencer is team boss, with Brazilian Christian Fittipaldi moving over to Lamborghini, along with Kathy Muller on the team. And Domenico Schiattarella will be test driver. Laurent Aiello will be development driver. Bruno Giacomelli pits in from P7. He was the first of the pit stoppers in the first rotation, remember. So yet again, he is the first one to pit in. His race leader, Aguri Suzuki, makes light work of the Colombian Roberto Guerrero. And Martin Brundle in the Minardi pits in as well. Speaking of Minardi, it's going to be Pierluigi Martini staying on with Michael Gillespie's team. And Eric Comas will get his chance to race in Formula 1. He's currently leading the championship in Formula 3000. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on in Formula 1. Ben Schneider will be the team test driver. Anthony Reid will be the young driver at Glenfiddich Minardi. And then Lego Fondmetal will come to the sport next year with Ed Hunter. No drivers confirmed as yet, but the team name will essentially go from being Lego Osella to Lego Fondmetal. And then we'll have the AGS Holden Racing Team, which is effectively a factory entry from the Australian car giants Holden. Tristan Digby is team boss. And we're still very keen to see who's going to be joining Wayne Gardner in the team on the driving front. Gabriele Tarquini is set to be demoted to the team's test driver role, with Eric van der Poel of Belgium coming in for the squad next season. So that is going to be a fascinating partnership. Monteverdi, as we mentioned earlier, will partner up with the Viant brand. They'll run Cosworth engines that will be rebadged as Viants. And we'll have an interesting driver lineup there, because they've already confirmed a very strong lineup of drivers. JJ Leto and Ivan Capelli will be on the driving front. Capelli moving across from Leighton House. Alessandro Zanardi will be team test driver, and young Brazilian star Rubens Barrichello will become the team's development driver and young star. So we'll be eager to see how Monteverdi Viant get on. The BMW Works factory effort comes in for 1991, and it'll be known as Gulf Davidoff BMW. With team boss Serge Stoffmill already very serious about next year. He's hiring the experience of Stefan Johansson, along with the youth and exuberance of Damon Hill. And into the pits comes JJ Leto from P5. Willie T. Ribbs, the American, will be the test driver at Gulf Davidoff BMW. Then it's the Zepter Jordan Ferrari team. Team boss Topher Smith is still trying to find some drivers for next year, but he has confirmed that the young development driver is going to be a Finnish driver by the name of Mika Salo. The San Carlo Coloni Honda team are going to be involved next year, because Colonis will no longer be powered by Ferraris. They will have Honda engines for 1991. Lewis Passendale taking over the team. And it'll have the Italian Andrea De Cesaris as team leader alongside Alan McNish. He will move across from the Life Squad. A test and development driver yet to be confirmed. Zach Speed will have BMW engines next year with Rick Hammercat. And it'll be interesting to see what the team come up with for 1991. They have Joachim Winkelhock and Tommy Byrne behind the wheel, along with Philippe Adams and Ellen Law in the test driver and young development driver roles. And then the last two teams, it'll be the Nicholas McDonald's Reynard team for next year with Renault engines and team boss Phil Kinch. And he's going to have a very exciting time of it next year, with the Reynard team having only signed Marco Apicella to their driving strength next year. That's their young development driver sorted. And then finally, we're going to have the Jägermeister March team with Renault engines. Marcus Johansson, the team boss, has already signed Perry McCarthy to their driving strength for next year, as well as the Frenchman Eric Ellery, who will be the development driver, and he will be competing for the Formula 3000 crown of 1991. That is all she wrote, and that is where we're at with things at this precise moment in time. I'm sure that after the Belgian Grand Prix, a lot more interesting news stories will come out of the water. There is an interesting story to note that the as Katayama makes the move to lap an AGS. The US Grand Prix was due to be taking place for the third year running on the streets of Phoenix, but there have been some difficulties with the contract of the circuit, and the drivers and teams were not particularly impressed with the shenanigans that took place in 1990. And so with Martini and Gasho coming in for the pit stops, it's time to get into the pit stop mode. But just to finish the point by informing you that next year's US Grand Prix will start the season as normal, but it will be coming from the Burke Lakefront Airport in Cleveland, Ohio. So a very interesting outlet for the US Grand Prix next year, and certainly a venue change. So we'll be interested to see what the Cleveland Burke Lakefront Airport gives us for 1991. That's Leto locking up behind Gasho, and those two are obviously still battling for a place on the podium here. There's Michael Schumacher, 12.5 seconds back from the battle for the lead between Suzuki and Bernard. There is Eric Bernard, and he's got Eddie Irvine in between him and Aguri Suzuki. That is not doing him any favours at all. In fact, Suzuki comes into the pits, so Bernard drops into the lead of the race, and Aguri Suzuki, the Japanese driver, makes his second and final pit stop of this Birmingham Superprix race. It could be a third pit stop, actually. No, I'm wrong. It is a third stop. So a 3-stop strategy for Aguri Suzuki today. And the battle is still raging. 9 seconds on the dot, a little bit quicker than the first stop. But where is the Japanese driver going to filter out? That's the big question. And that's Martin Donnelly, I think, going around the outside. No, it's not. There's Donnelly. So Donnelly couldn't quite make it up into 4th place. Suzuki is trying to get past the Life, which is not giving him any help and support at all, Alan McNish. As Paul Warwick and Ukyo Katayama make pit stops. Oh, that was a big moment as Aguri Suzuki nudges the back of the Life that tried to get out of the way as he was overtaking it. So a very frustrated Aguri Suzuki. And the Life gets back through on the inside, and eventually the Japanese driver Aguri Suzuki drives right round the outside. Now he is joining the Honda project for next year. So a very frustrated Aguri Suzuki there. And he just nudges the back of the Life just to give him a hurry up more than anything else. Martin Donnelly's managed to get past him, and now it's Pierluigi Martini's turn. But Eric Bernard and Michael Schumacher are now on 2-stop strategies, as we know. So they're going to go a little further into the race. Big lock-up from JJ Leto. He can't afford to do that too many times, as the Monteverde has a little bit of a moment in terms of grip. Now Eric Bernard continues in the lead of the race, with Michael Schumacher bearing down on him. And the gap between Schumacher and Bernard is coming down as Irvine locks up big time into turn 1 and rejoins right into the path of the AGS. That was a little naughty from Eddie Irvine. As we watch now Christian Fittipaldi in the Life, the nephew of 2-time Formula 1 World Champion Emerson Fittipaldi. And Tarquini's having a battle with his own teammate now by the look of it, as they try to get out of the way of Eric Bernard. Or is that JJ Leto? I think that is Leto, in fact, who is down in 8th place, and the AGS cars are not giving Leto any help at all. So that got a little bit tricky in the traffic. Meanwhile, up front, Eric Bernard in the Monteverde is actually being caught by the man in 2nd place, Michael Schumacher, in the Reynard. He's chipping away at the advantage there, Schumacher. This is probably why Ferrari had their interest in him. The German driver definitely making the best of a bad job as far as the season is concerned, and that is Suzuki getting out of the way of a wayward Christian Fittipaldi. We're beyond half distance in this Birmingham Superprix. Lap 46 out of 80. That makes it 35 laps to go. And Michael Schumacher really is chipping out that gap. He's taken half a second out of Bernard's lead in the last 2 laps. So Schumacher is chipping away at the advantage. He can't afford to sit on his laurels, as that was Ratzenberger having a go at Ginzani. But just 2 retirements from the Birmingham Superprix thus far, as Michael Schumacher continues to close up as best as he can and as quickly as possible on Eric Bernard. And the 2 of the AGS cars continue their duel for position. It's Guerrero who gets past Tarquini on this occasion. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher still going strong in 2nd position in the Reynard. And that car is going to have a complete rebrand for the 1991 season. But it's certainly looking good from their point of view. They have yet to qualify for a Grand Prix, but this is definitely going to help them achieve their ambitions in the long term. Because if they can qualify, inverted commas, here, then they've got a good shot of it. As Oguri Suzuki sets the fastest lap of the race. A 106.837 for the Japanese driver in the Lola Renault. Much more comfortable in Japanese machinery, and that's what he's going to be competing in next year. The Honda Formula One factory outfit. But they will still obviously give engines to several teams next year. They've decided to give them to McLaren and Tyrrell once again, but this time they're also joining forces with the Italian Coloni team, which is going to have a San Carlo backing. So here is Eddie Irvine through the hairpin. The Real team, which is in their final hour as far as many people are concerned. It looks as though Real will not be back on the grid again in 1991. So it's going to be a fascinating run. Here's Mark Blundell in the Lego Osella. Now, with Bernard and Schumacher still yet to pit, Blundell is essentially one of the drivers now battling for the victory. But he's going to be coming into the pits for his second pit stop very soon. Schumacher's obviously on his way to the pits within a few laps as well. And then so is race leader Eric Bernard in the Monteverde as Eddie Irvine gets it wrong through the final turn once again. That Real really has struggled to make an impression in 1990, and it's certainly not going to do anybody any more harm in the 1991 season, because that Real is quite literally on its last legs. But Eddie Irvine has been doing the best he can with it. Willie T. Ribbs has definitely got himself a contract for next year to be part of the testing program at BMW. And with that, he's also going to be mounting a campaign, I'm told, for the Indy 500. So it'd be great to see if he can make it work. So Martin Brundle still going strong behind Paul Warwick, trying to second guess him. I think Brundle is going to be much happier when he moves on to Benetton next year in a car that could battle for Grand Prix victories if anything is to be told for next year. But then, of course, they are going to be in Porsche engine cars, so that's also something they're going to have to keep an eye on. But we know how fast the Porsche project has been working in 1990. They've gone from cars that couldn't finish races to cars that are winning pre-qualifying heats now. And Donnelly comes into the pits in the Eurobrun. So Martin Donnelly comes in. Michael Schumacher, meanwhile, has got that gap down to 10 seconds. So that is significant, because Schumacher is chipping away at Bernard's advantage. If anything goes wrong for the Frenchman in this race, then Schumacher is going to be right there to pick up the pieces, and he could really do with some positivity in that car. As Giacomelli has a bit of a moment there with one of the AGS cars, I think that is. It is indeed, it's Tarquini, essentially unlapping himself from Bruno Giacomelli. So a little bit late from the AGS squad for 1990. But they've got some great support from Holden coming in next year, as the Australian car giant is going to come into Formula One. They'll run their own engines, I'm told. So that could be a fascinating project. It'll be underpowered initially, I'm also given some indication, but it is an all-Australian F1 project in the same semblance as Brabham. Although Brabham nowadays, of course, is based in the United Kingdom, Motor Racing Developments. And that car is currently being masterminded by the Welsh team principal, Ewan Gale. And apparently there's going to be a lot more Welsh influence in the car next year, to which everybody at Brabham, including Alain Prost, I'm told, finds rather amusing. But they're not going to argue with it. They've got a competitive car. They'll go racing in it. It's as simple as that. Now, both Johnny Herbert and Paul Tracy have made their pit stops in what is, of course, the second of two pit stops in the lead. And there's Eric Bernard. Bernard comes in at the end of lap 50, in fact. So Eric Bernard comes in with exactly 30 laps to go. So it's going to be exactly 32 or 33 laps of fuel that goes in. Indeed, there it is, 32. So Bernard comes in. Schumacher takes over the lead. Suzuki is going to go into second place, I'm fairly sure. Indeed he does. He passes the pits now. What about Martini? I think he's going to go past the pits, isn't he? Yes, he does. Just gets past Bernard. So Martini is in third position. But Martini, I'm fairly sure, has got to make another pit stop. So now the three stoppers have really got a step on it. Although Michael Schumacher is going to come in fairly late into the pits by the look of it. He needs to get a wiggle on, actually, because there's a chance that Bernard might beat him out of the pits, especially when he had 10 seconds deficit. So Schumacher could do with a bit of luck here, really, as Martini gets past the life of Fittipaldi. So Christian Fittipaldi gets out of the way. There's Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi in third position. Now what about Schumacher in the Reynard? He's coming into the pits at the end of this lap. So that's not going to be fantastic news for the Reynard team in terms of trying to get him out ahead of Eric Bernard, because Bernard is only 14 seconds back, and you lose about 20 seconds in the pits all in all. But here's Schumacher. It needs to be a fast pit stop. Fast turnaround, boys. 31 laps go in, so this car is going all the way to the finish of the Grand Prix, the Birmingham Superprix. Bernard's gone through though, so it's all to no avail. Schumacher should rejoin in P6, I think, as Leto goes past the pits. So Schumacher will be in P6. He's making good progress, but he still needs to step it up a little bit if he's going to compete with the likes of Bernard, Suzuki and Martini today. Here's Martin Donnelly in front of the Porsche of Paul Warwick. A great race going on so far. Only the two retirements, Damon Hill in the Converse Dallara and Alessandro Zanardi in the Lego Osella. The car's coping very well with this Birmingham Superprix circuit, and we're only on lap 52. But there is still a third pit stop to consider. Now Schumacher is 18.4 seconds back from the race lead. Bernard is 6 seconds back from the race lead. So the man who's looking good to win the Birmingham Superprix right now is actually the Frenchman Eric Bernard in the Monteverdi. He looks the most poised to get the job done. But you've got to remember the likes of Suzuki, Martini, Gasho and Leto all need to make a third pit stop. Bernard and Schumacher up in the top 6 do not. So this is all going to come down to eloquent strategy and who's going to have the best time of it. So Suzuki leads the way, almost 6 seconds ahead of Martini, who's having problems with Eric Bernard already. And let's not forget that Eric Bernard is on a lighter fuel strategy. He's on a two-stop strategy, I should say. As Bernard gets up the inside of Martini, I was going to say that he has better tyres to consider, and that's Ghinzani pulling off. Ghinzani's got a brake problem. So Piercarlo Ghinzani, I'm afraid, is out of the Birmingham Superprix of 1990. So Piercarlo Ghinzani is added to the retirements list. And that is not great news from his perspective, I'm afraid. So all done and dusted from him. Here's Eric Bernard. 6 seconds back from Aguri Suzuki. He could catch him and pass him on fresh tyres. With Suzuki needing to make another pit stop on a street race like this, it's looking like Bernard has got the strategy bang on. He doesn't even need to catch Suzuki. He just needs to maximise these tyres, not push them too hard. The gap is 6.3 as Blundell tries to get a move on Giacomelli. But Aguri Suzuki definitely needs to make another pit stop. And it can't come soon enough for Eric Bernard. He would love to take back the lead of the Birmingham Superprix race. And there he is in the Monteverdi. We're really looking forward to seeing the new workings of the team in 1991 as Blundell again unsuccessfully makes the bid on Giacomelli and nearly falls into the complete clutches of Ukyo Katayama, the Coloni driver, who is going to be, as we mentioned before, moving to Honda next year. Martin Donnelly, still looking for a race drive for 1991. But doing a fair job here, Martin Donnelly. Always in the top 10, it seems, dragging that Eurobrun a lot higher than it deserves to be. And a fair and handy driver. Oh, that's Suzuki! Suzuki's got a loose wheel! Aguri Suzuki is out of the race. Let's have a look at it again. You can see, look, a loose wheel. That's not been long out of the pits. He must have rubbed the barrier somewhere. So Aguri Suzuki is out from the lead of the race. And that is absolutely disastrous for the Japanese driver. Lola are severely compromised there. And Aguri Suzuki is not going to win the Birmingham Superprix. Well, that means that Bernard is leading the race. And he doesn't even have to panic about another pit stop. Because Bernard has done his pit stop strategies for the race. So he can carry on to the end. The man who's favourite to get second place now is Michael Schumacher. Because he doesn't need to stop again. Martini, Gasho and Leto all do. So on a circuit that's quite short and bumpy and twisty, most of the cars have held up quite well, but on this occasion Aguri Suzuki joins the rather short and slim retirements list. But there's Mark Blundell having a good race of it. There's Martini running a solid race in the Minardi. Second place, 1.3 seconds back from Bernard. He's got a lighter car, but at the same time he's got nowhere near as fresh tyres. So Martini really in a struggle here. It looks as though this man, Eric Bernard, is going to have this race on a plate, and that's going to be great news for David Yunt, who has really worked hard with this Monteverdi team. Oh, that's Martini! He hits the wall! Now, this is terrible luck for Martini, and that's going to put Bertrand Gachot right on the rear wing. Surely Gachot's going to make a bid into the first corner. He can't get there, and Gachot has to let it go. But Pierluigi Martini, a big mistake out of the final corner, nudging the barrier. And that really is a very close call for the Italian, who has already confirmed he's staying with Minardi for 1991. As Katayama tries again, this time on Giacomelli. And he goes up the inside, and Giacomelli's run wide there, I think. No, sorry, Katayama couldn't quite get the move done. So Katayama goes deep. Into the pits comes Gabriele Tarquini. I'm fairly sure that's a scheduled pit stop, even though he's now right down to the back as Blundell laps Eddie Irvine in the Real. Well, a thrilling race it's been from the drivers up front, but Eric Bernard, the man who started from pole position, who lost ground initially, lost 2 places to Suzuki and Gachot, has made it work in this part of the pit stop sequence, because the 2-stop strategy, it appears, was the right way to go for Bernard, who is now 3.6 seconds ahead of Martini, who needs to pit again, and I don't really see a way back for the likes of Gachot and Martini. Gachot's got past Martini, I'm told. So where's that happened? Yes, at the first corner. So Martini having his problems out of the final turn. Gachot has got past Martini. So that is a great bit of driving there from the Belgian, who is up to 2nd place in the Coloni. Now, if this were a Grand Prix, we'd be talking about Monteverdi, the Coloni of Gachot, and the Minardi of Martini all going through to the Grand Prix a little later on, but as this is the Birmingham Superprix, it's all for the pre-qualifying teams, and points do go towards the GoBobby.UK Cup. An initial suggestion that teams would score points for the actual Constructors' Championship was thrown out of turn, as Ratzenberger, by the way, has got past Martin Brundle on this lap, so he has got up into 11th place. We're on board with Johnny Herbert in the sole remaining Converse Dallara, and he's not really been able to make much of this race, unfortunately. The car not quite handling the Birmingham Superprix circuit as was hoped. So he's definitely having to take it as cautious as he can. Martini still hustling Bertrand Gachot. And the race continues on. Behind, we've got JJ Leto about 5 seconds down the road. And Michael Schumacher is only, well, a whisker under 2 seconds behind Leto. So great opportunity still. Down the straight. Up towards the braking zone. I think Martini might have a run at Gachot here. Into the braking zone is the other Coloni of Katayama. Has a look again up the inside of Giacomelli, and Martini has got past Gachot, I can tell you that. So he has got through. There is Martini. Through past Gachot. A textbook manoeuvre, but Gachot's coming back at him. So Gachot's trying to come around the outside to get the move, and he's done it. Brilliant. Brilliant from Gachot. So Bertrand Gachot pulling off an amazing overtaking move out of the corner. He had the nerve to go after Martini. Martini tries again. And these two really are going to cause an issue if they're not careful. Having a terrific tussle for 2nd place. 6 seconds down the road from Bernard, who doesn't need to pit again. But these two definitely do. And they're going to be in within the next 6 laps or so. I think Gachot will come in before Martini. But they're having a terrific duel. Here's Eric Bernard. That's Martin Brundle in the Minardi trying to chase after Roland Ratzenberger's Reynard. But it's Ratzenberger's teammate Michael Schumacher who is in a good position right now. He's in P5, 12 seconds off the lead, but not needing another pit stop. And we've lost one driver battling for the victory. That is the Japanese star Aguri Suzuki, who was leading, but unfortunately a loose wheel, which we think came from him striking the barrier. Unfortunately, that's his race run. As Willie T. Ribbs, the new BMW test driver for 1991, continues on his way round. This American star has really been showing a few people what he's capable of. He's going to have a push at the Indy 500, I'm told, next year, in a deal that's being put together with the American stand-up comedian Bill Cosby. So there is Willie T. Ribbs having a good run out of the final turn. He's actually trying to shake off the attentions of the race leader, Eric Bernard, who is coming up to lap him. And there's Martini. Another rub of the barrier for Pierluigi Martini. He is really struggling in that Minardi to get the car slowing down. So the Glenfiddich Minardi continues to be a bit of a handful for the Italian Pierluigi Martini, who will be back in that car once again next year as he renews his deal for 1991 with team boss Michael Gillespie. And that's Giacomelli in the other Lola. That's an engine failure. So both Lolas out of the race then. What a shame for Bruno Giacomelli. Their season was going so strong at the start of the year. But now in this latter stage, Lola really have hit a weak spot. So Johnny Herbert's going to go past the scene of Giacomelli's retirement. And the Converse Dallara moves up into 12th position. There's Bertrand Gachot in the Coloni. Ratzenberger is in the pits. Now this is the first of the 3 stoppers, I think. So Ratzenberger comes in as Irvine gets a move up the inside in the Real. That puts him up into 18th place past Alan McNish. That's the only race they can be involved in. Martini, look how quickly he's dropped back from Gachot. He's really struggling to keep this car on the straight and narrow. No wonder he's rubbing the barrier. He's getting very close to it as he goes by. As Gachot in the Coloni continues to tour his way around, and Willie T. Ribbs just about gets the Real slowed down. Goodness me, that was close. He's running in 13th place though. A much better effort from Willie T. Ribbs this time. He's had his moments, but today at the Birmingham Superprix, he really does seem to be loving this British street circuit vibe. And he's going very well. There's Bernard. So Eric Bernard having a good race. Here comes Ratzenberger to make his bid on Willie T. Ribbs as Katayama makes his way into the pits in the Coloni, and Ratzenberger has got past Ribbs. So Ratzenberger takes him on and gets up into 13th position. Meanwhile, this is Bertrand Gachot, the Belgian. Another solid run from him, and the Coloni driver doing a phenomenal job as he continues to charge after Bernard. It's all going to be to no avail because in a few laps he's going to be making his way into the pits. You can see there he's only got 5 laps of fuel on board. By contrast to the race leader Bernard, who can go to the end of the race. There is Bernard, and we can see he's got 21 laps left of fuel in the car with 19 laps remaining. So all going perfectly well for Eric Bernard, and fuel depletion has not really been as difficult a problem as we saw at the Hungaroring. So Bernard, Gachot, Martini, Schumacher, Leto and Blundell is the order in the top 6. Then Donnelly, Warwick, Brundle and Katayama. The next race, of course, you're going to see, the drivers will pack up their race gear after this. The teams and drivers will fly out to Belgium at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit. And directly after this race, they're going to have the Belgian Grand Prix, which will be business as usual once again. It'll be back to the pre-qualifying 50% race distance and then to the Formula 1 race itself after that. But the Birmingham Superprix definitely has been a strong success in terms of an event. May not have produced the most thrilling and exciting race, but it's certainly... Oh, Ratzenberger just nudging the barriers there. Now that's going to be a factor obviously because the pre-qualifying teams will want to move their mid-season non-championship race to a different location if they will feel that the Birmingham Superprix hasn't really provided them with the spectacle they wanted. The teams obviously have a big vote in what happens in the Retro Racing Managers League as JJ Leto comes into the pits from 5th position. So Schumacher goes through into 4th, Blundell goes through into 5th, and Martin Donnelly is going to go through into 7th place ahead of Paul Warwick in the Porsche. So 8.3 second pit stop. No problems at all there for JJ Leto. And Donnelly should scream past the pits anytime soon, which he does. Paul Warwick should be there. Oh no, he's coming into the pits himself. So no problems at all then for the Porsche team as they make their pit stop. Here's Martini in the Minardi. Gachot is there in 2nd place. He is catching him. But I think they're going to have their pit stops before this race battle becomes interesting. Here's Gachot in the Coloni, and he is coming into the pits this time by. But up in front, it's all going well for this man. Eric Bernard, 7 seconds clear of Gachot and Martini. And Bertrand Gachot, there he goes. He dives into the pits in the Coloni. And Martini goes through into 2nd place. He's now got a step on it because Gachot was only a couple of seconds off the road. Schumacher goes by in the Reynard into 3rd position. That's going to become 2nd when the pit stops all finish up because Martini's got to make a pit stop too. Out goes Gachot. Where's Blundell? He goes through. And I'm fairly sure he can run to the end. Yes, he can in the Lego Acela. So Gachot rejoins in 5th position in front of JJ Leto in the 2nd Monteverdi. So here's Eric Bernard. Closing up on the AGS, I believe, to put a 2nd lap on Gabriele Tarquini, the Italian, who's definitely making more hints that perhaps his future in the sport lies more in touring car racing than it does in Formula 1. He's still going to be with the AGS Holden squad next year as their official team test driver. We know that it's going to be a motorcycle world champion that makes his Formula 1 bid next year. That is Wayne Gardner. So he will join the Holden racing team. And apparently they are looking for an Aussie or a Kiwi, is the quote from Holden racing team. They really want to put an Aussie or a Kiwi into the car. That certainly gives David Brabham a shot at a Formula 1 seat for 1991. Here's Pierluigi Martini losing ground rapidly. 9.5 seconds is now the gap. He is due into the pits on this lap though. So this man, Michael Schumacher, is going to be elevated into third place very soon indeed. But Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi still struggling a little bit to get this car up to tempo. And on lap 65 of 80, he's basically just fighting against time now. He's doing the best he can with what he's got. But Eric Bernard leads from Pierluigi Martini's Minardi. But Martini is due into the pits on this lap. So it's not going to be long that the Italian sustains this position. Here's Michael Schumacher in the Reynard. Still going very well indeed and still looking very positive. So from his point of view, there's nothing really to be concerned with. As Eric Bernard continues on his way in the lead here at the Birmingham Superprix, and Martini comes into the pit lane. So a significant pit stop as Michael Schumacher goes through into second position. And Martini will probably get out behind Gasho, I would think. So Blundell will go through into third in the Lego Osella. And Gasho will go through to fourth in the Coloni. There goes Blundell. Here comes Gasho. A longer stop than needed at Minardi. That's really cost them. So Martini gets out, and I think Leto might get through into fifth position as he comes past the pits. It's going to be close. Yes, there goes Leto. Leto just gets past Martini. A terrible pit stop at Minardi and not great pace from Martini. So that has put the Monteverdis into first and fifth place now. As Mark Blundell in the Fondmetal-backed Lego Osella is running in third position on home soil. That'll be a great result for Mark Blundell and the team. And that will give them good confidence ahead of 1991. They've still yet to decide who's going to be on their driving front next year, but for an absolute guarantee, it's not going to be Zanardi and it's not going to be Blundell because they have signed contracts elsewhere for 1991. Mark Blundell, of course, is going to be now part of the Benetton team. They've obviously seen something very positive in him. And as for the Italian Alessandro Zanardi, well, he's not going to be staying with the team. He's going to be moving to the Monteverdi outfit next year. He's quite confident of success. Here's Johnny Herbert in the Converse Dallara, opted to stay with the team for next season. So the battle is on as Johnny Herbert continues his little tussle with Roland Ratzenberger, although that is Paul Tracy behind him in the Porsche. So Johnny Herbert is in between a rock and a hard place now, in between the two Porsches of Paul Warwick and Paul Tracy. There's Eric Bernard. Behind him is a Reynard, but don't panic because that's not Schumacher. That is a gearbox failure for Gasho, though. Gasho in the Coloni. So Bertrand Gasho Coloni is out of the race. That is a disaster. And oh, goodness me, almost got struck by the Real as Gasho's car slows to a crawl. And I'm afraid that is the Belgians' race done here at Birmingham. In exactly the same place that we lost Damon Hill, but just 13 laps from the end of the race. Bertrand Gasho seizes the gearbox, and that's a shame because fourth place was very much on the cards, and so now the Belgian Bertrand Gasho is out of the Birmingham Superprix of 1990. What a shame. But Eric Bernard leads Michael Schumacher by 12 seconds as Johnny Herbert is now elevated to 10th position in behind Paul Warwick, and Paul Tracy is behind him now, so that is good news. Here is Michael Schumacher, the young German from Kerpen. The Reynard has been putty in his hands on a number of occasions this year. They've not had the luck to get him to a decent finish. But maybe, just maybe, the Birmingham Superprix, the non-championship race, when the pressure's off, is the race that he can actually stand and deliver. He is catching Eric Bernard, but he needs to catch at a rate faster than he is currently doing, because the gap is 12 seconds with 12 laps to go. He needs to take a second a lap out of Bernard at least in the hope to move his way forward. And at the moment, he's not doing enough. He's taking hundredths out of the advantage, not tenths. And there's Martin Brundle just locking up at the Halfords corner. He's got Paul Warwick breathing down his neck in the Porsche. The team that continues to develop that particular car. And of course the Porsche team have elected to sign off their works manufacturer entry from the end of 1990. Their last race is going to be the Australian Grand Prix, so I'm told. They're not going to take part in the New Zealand Grand Prix of Bukeko. But Eric Bernard leads Michael Schumacher by 11.8 seconds, and it's enough for Eric Bernard to be quietly confident. There's Martin Donnelly, a great drive from him today actually. He's in P6 in the Eurobrun, and he deserves that. He was cast aside by Lotus and demoted down to Eurobrun, where team boss Lewis Bassendale jumped at the chance of him, and to be fair, Donnelly is repaying him in kind, doing a grand job here in P6. There's Blundell in the Osella. Third position for that car, which is looking very strong indeed actually. Good to see such a strong performance from this car. But the Lego continues to support the Grand Prix team that is in the pre-qualifying session. Juan Fangio the second, doing a reasonable job in the other Eurobrun, but it just shows you the difference between Donnelly and Fangio the second. Eurobrun is not going to be on the F3000 grid, the F1 grid in 1990, in deference to the fact they're going to be in F3000 next year. More news on the F3000 grid as it continues to develop. But essentially, the Formula 3000 series is going to be made up of drivers from the F1 teams in their development drivers' roles, because they're going to be ineligible to racing Grand Prix. So they will be development drivers instead. 10 laps to go, and this man, Michael Schumacher, is chipping away at Eric Bernard, but the problem he has is not fast enough. The gap is down to 11.878 seconds, but with 10 laps to go, he's not gaining a second per lap, so it looks good for Eric Bernard in the car up front. That is the Monteverdi, and great for Mark Blundell as well, although he has got the Monteverdi of JJ Leto closing up a little bit. So he does need to get a bit of a wiggle on. Here's Eric Bernard. Now, what can Ratzenberger do to assist his teammate in closing up on Bernard? He's not going to hold him up unfairly, but he might just give him a little bit of a psychological nudge to try and get through, and that could cause some problems for Eric Bernard, especially if Ratzenberger isn't going to be particularly kind to him in his bid to get by, because obviously Schumacher is catching. And the Reynard team want to give Eric Bernard a little bit of some stress. They want to give him a little bit of pressure, and that could lead to mistakes for Eric Bernard. 9 laps to go. The gap has come down to 11.1 at the finish line. I think it's going to come down again to 11 dead. 9 laps to go. 11 seconds is the gap. But it's not coming down fast enough, I'm afraid. So there's Martini, stuck behind JJ Leto in the Monteverdi. So Martini trying to elevate Minardi's chances. If this were a Grand Prix, we'd be talking about Monteverdi, Reynard, and Mark Blundell's Osella squad to get through to a Grand Prix, which is great news because Reynard haven't actually qualified for a Grand Prix. They won't have done if they finish where they are in this race, but it will definitely give Reynard a bit of a leg up for the remainder of the season. They're desperate to get into a Grand Prix with Michael Schumacher, and this kind of opportunity is going to help them no end, as Eric Bernard is actually struggling to close up and lap Ratzenberger's Reynard. Ratzenberger's been told to step on it and give Bernard a hard time, and so now Bernard is actually not able to overhaul that car. Blundell laps the Real, no problem at all getting past Willie T. Ribbs. So the battle continues, and it gets bitterly frustrating for the race leaders. For Michael Schumacher, who's trying to catch the race leader, Eric Bernard. And the gap is 11.1 still. There's Blundell, still trying to get closer. What is Willie T. Ribbs playing at? He's going to get up the inside and unlap himself from Blundell. Well, there's no rule against it. But that's not great news for Blundell, because now he's got Leto and Martini coming through. Now Blundell's got by. Leto hasn't yet. And there comes Martini. This is going to be an opportunity for Pierluigi Martini to make a run at Leto into the Halfords corner, I think. He's going to have the slipstream. He's going to wait. He's going to savour the moment. But Mark Blundell, going well in third position in the Lego Acela, has now gained some ground. Here's Schumacher. The gap down to 10.7. With 7 laps to go, Michael Schumacher is still chipping away at Eric Bernard's Monteverde, but it's not fast enough. So second place is still all that's on the cards as we ride with Mark Blundell in the Lego Acela. He's got pressure from behind. JJ Leto and Pierluigi Martini are getting close. And they've all just lapped the Real of Willie T. Ribbs, who is having a race with the fairies out there in 13th place. He's trying to close up on Ratzenberger. So he's using the slower cars in front of him in the hope of getting that done. But let's not forget that Roland Ratzenberger is still the man that Eric Bernard is struggling to put a lap on. As we ride on board with Mark Blundell's Lego Acela again. Leto and Martini behind. 7 laps to go in this Birmingham Superprix of 1990. It may not have been a thriller second, but it's certainly been very entertaining stuff at the front end of the field here. And Eric Bernard is set to take his first win in the GoBobby.UK Cup in 1990, with Michael Schumacher chasing him down to the bitter end, and that's going to give both drivers a whole heap of confidence moving forward. They can head to the Belgian Grand Prix knowing they've got good, solid race cars underneath them, as Irvine almost trips over Ukyo Katayama, who goes around the outside, the Japanese driver. Katayama in 7th place. He's not particularly happy with Eddie Irvine, who's making friends all around the racetrack and not of a pleasant nature. Another good race from Paul Warwick in the Porsche. He's 8th position behind these two. And then Martin Brundle's Minardi and Johnny Herbert's Converse Dallara are in the top 10. As Schumacher continues to push, he really wants a decent finish to this Birmingham Superprix. He wants to try and make some headway into Eric Bernard. But Bernard, interestingly, is not catching Ratzenberger. Ratzenberger is actually stepping up to close in on and pass Paul Tracy in the Porsche. So Ratzenberger is playing the team game here. He doesn't want Bernard to lap him in the slightest. But Schumacher did lose 0.4 of a second to Bernard in that last sector, the second sector of the lap. So Bernard seems to be much quicker in the second and third sectors as Schumacher gets a lap on the AGS of Tarquini. So Tarquini gets out of the way and lets the German prodigy move up into second position. There goes the Reynard. 5 laps remaining of this 1990 Birmingham Superprix. Here's Eddie Irvine. Down the back straight. Making his way back up towards the Complex Town section. And whether this is the last Birmingham Superprix to be held or not, it's certainly given the Birmingham fans what they wanted. Formula One cars at full pelt racing around the city streets. So a fabulous bit of racecraft throughout, but Eric Bernard has been a very shrewd operator. Now, Tracy and Ratzenberger are having a great scrabble for 11th place, but they've got a Zach Speed in front of them who's causing a bit of a headache. And that's going to give Eric Bernard a problem or two if he catches them at the wrong moment. So the Zach Speed Yamaha in front is having a little bit of a moment, shall we say, as Ratzenberger's lost some ground. There goes Bernard, lapping the Zach Speed, but now he's got to try and close up on and pass Roland Ratzenberger. The gap between Bernard and Schumacher is still steady at 10.8 seconds. Blundell is slipping back a bit now. The gap down is up to 27.3. JJ Leto's only a second behind him. And now Eric Bernard has got a run on Ratzenberger, and that's going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy. No problem at all for Eric Bernard. He gets through. So the Reynard team are not going to win by filthy tactics, as Ratzenberger lets the Frenchman go into another strong position on the road, with a little bit of time on the road to catch up to Paul Tracy's Porsche in 11th position. But so far so good. This third place battle could go to the wire. Blundell, Leto and Martini having a great scrap over third. Osella, Monteverde and Minardi. But Mark Blundell would so love to be on the podium on home soil here in the Birmingham Superprix in a Formula One car. He's had some bad luck this year after some very impressive race drives. So the last thing he wants now is to lose another one. But it's been really exciting stuff in this 1990 Birmingham Superprix. Don't forget that the next race on the calendar is going to be the 1990 Belgian Grand Prix. Pre-qualifying over the course of tomorrow, and then the race itself. They've got to get on a plane to Birmingham pretty quick once this race is over. But they'll make sure they are there. And this man will. He'll want to qualify for the Belgian Grand Prix in the form he's currently in, and the car as well. But this GoBobby.UK Cup race, the Birmingham Superprix of 1990, has been a thriller for Eric Bernard and the team. They have stayed solid and consistent throughout this last part of the event. The two-stop strategy was the way to go. They didn't need to panic. They let the cars go past them. And Bernard and Schumacher have been so solid in terms of tyre management. Donnelly's in the pits. Donnelly is in the pits. Now, what's happened there? He's got a throttle issue. What a shame for Martin Donnelly. The Eurobrun was going so well in his hands, and Donnelly is now going to rejoin behind Paul Tracy, I think. So Herbert goes by, Tracy goes by, and the Eurobrun is out of the points. What a disaster. As Ratzenberger goes by as well, and that is the Zach speed going through. So Donnelly, he is lapped. And that was such a good race for him. He was running in P6, looking good for some solid points there. But it's not going to be. 2 laps to go. And for Eric Bernard, he has 10.4 seconds on the young German prodigy Michael Schumacher. A little lock up into the hairpin, but no panic for Eric Bernard. He's only got 2 laps to go. So the Monteverdi running strong here, right to the bitter end. And he's got every reason to be confident about what the outcome is going to be after this. So a fabulous performance. And he really is doing an absolutely stellar job as he closes up on the Porsche of Paul Tracy, which is in 10th place. And that will get the Canadian a point in the GoBobby.UK Cup. So good solid effort from the Canadian. It won't be his first point of the year either. Michael Schumacher looking good for 2nd place. He's made up some time on Bernard on this last lap, but then Eric Bernard has been stuck in traffic. Blundell's got Martini closing down on him. So Martini's got to run for 3rd position. Here comes Martini. P3, can he make it there in the Minardi? No, he has to hang back as Eric Bernard goes into the final lap of the 1990 Birmingham Superprix. And it's going to be a win for Monteverdi for the 2nd time in the GoBobby.UK Cup this year. And this bodes well for 1991. They wanted a solid package that they could win with. They had a podium overall in a Grand Prix last year. So now there's a genuine chance they can be competitive as Paul Tracy gets out of the way and lets Eric Bernard go. But what a solid race it has been from the Frenchman as he continues to motor his way through. There's Alain McNish getting it slightly crossed up in the battle with his close rival for this race, Johnny Herbert. But Herbert is in 9th place and McNish is a lap down. But there's Eric Bernard and he comes into the final corner of the 1990 Birmingham Superprix. It's been a commanding effort and Eric Bernard wins the Birmingham Superprix. Fantastic job from the Frenchman and the Monteverdi team. 2nd place is going to go to Michael Schumacher in the Reynard, his highest finish of the season, and a great job from the German. Such a shame this isn't a full Grand Prix. Martini has got into 3rd place on the last lap, past Mark Blundell. So the Minardi is going to capture the podium away from Mark Blundell on the final tour. Martini is 3rd. Absolutely sensational performance. But what a race it was. And Eric Bernard has got the job done in front of Michael Schumacher. Pierluigi Martini is 3rd. And that was stunning stuff. That's good confidence now in the bag for Reynard. They can be pretty happy with their lot. That's going to be good development progress for next year. Oh, what's Paul Tracy up to on the slowing down lap? As he almost trips over one of the other cars. And Johnny Herbert has actually got damage to the front wing. What's happened there? So Johnny Herbert seems to have had an incident on the final lap. He's lost his front wing. And now he's trying to bring the car home in the points, but he's got held up with other drivers. So a very bizarre incident there for Johnny Herbert. So he's still going to come home in the points in 9th place, but he's done it in a rather unusual fashion. But what a sensational Birmingham Superprix it has been. And there is your race winner, Eric Bernard. He's been absolutely solid as a rock through this race. And I'm sure the Lola team will be ruining their luck that they got rid of him now, because he really is putting in some great performances. That will set them up very nicely indeed for the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps, which is the next race on the calendar. It's Monteverdi that wins for Eric Bernard, Michael Schumacher and Pierluigi Martini on the podium, Marc Blundell and JJ Leto from Ukyo Katayama, Paul Warwick is 7th for Porsche, then Martin Brundle is 8th, Johnny Herbert is 9th, and Paul Tracy is 10th in the second Porsche. Ratzenberger, Donnelly, Ribbs and Fittipaldi come next. Then it's Fangio II and Eddie Irvine from Roberto Guerrero and Alan McNish. The last finishers are Joachim Winkelhock in the Zach Speed and Gabriele Tarquini in the second AGS. The retirements, Bertrand Gachot with a gearbox failure, the 2 Lolas with an engine failure and a loose wheel between them. Ginzani's Zach Speed had brake failure, Zanardi had a gearbox issue, and Damon Hill was the first retirement with an engine failure in his Dallara. Aguri Suzuki may have been the fastest driver of the race, but he wasn't able to bring the result home today as his wheel came loose and handed that win to Eric Bernard in the Monteverdi ahead of Michael Schumacher and Pierluigi Martini. It's been a stunning race. We hope you've enjoyed it. And of course, don't forget, tomorrow, the Belgian Grand Prix returns us to business as usual in the Grand Prix 2 World Championship with the Retro Racing Managers League. I'm Jake Sanson. See you tomorrow at Spa.